Sometimes we focus our efforts in the wrong direction, right? We're pursuing opportunities, we're building relationships in the federal market, but they don't eventually turn into revenue. Certainly not into opportunities, but not into revenue. And in this lesson, I want to talk to you about focusing your effort, focusing it on federal agencies that actually are more likely to award contracts to 8A small businesses. This information today is going to be specific to 8A small businesses, but the process that I'm going to teach today, that can be used by any federal government contractor. Small business, large business, HUBZone, woman-owned small business, and service-disabled veteran-owned, right? So the process underlying can be used by anybody. In particular, today, I want to talk about the criteria I use to define which agencies are best for certified 8A small businesses. The second thing I want to talk about is which federal agencies prove with the awards that they actually do, with contract awards, that they value 8A firms. And then the last thing is we're going to cover our steps you can take to market your 8A small business to the federal agencies that are proving that they value 8A firms. Go knocking on their doors and I'll show you the steps that I recommend doing. So if you want to know which agencies value 8A small businesses the most, go ahead and put who loves 8A into the chat. Who loves 8As into the chat? Just let me know you're along for the ride, and we're going to focus on identifying and talking about which agencies really care about 8A small businesses. Before we get too much further, I want to just let you know who I am. My name is Neil McDonald. I'm the president of the GovCon Chamber of Commerce, and welcome to my daily live federal sales training where we provide tips for success in the federal market. We focus on the business development capture, the sales activity of your business. I spent 20 years as a small business owner in the federal market, and since 2018, I've been teaching people like you that government contracting is not a secret, it's just a process. When we follow the process, it's going to lead to repeatable, predictable success. And I know that's what you want. It's what I want for you every single day I do the training. Before we get started, do me a favor. Help buyers remember who you are. If you haven't done so already, put your company name into the chat. Put your core competency, 2 or 3 words, into the chat. Actually, if you're an 8A, put that in. Let us know that you're an 8A small business in here. I know there's many of us who are not 8As who are also in the training, but put that in. Let us know who you are. And then finally, engage with others in the chat. You can do it now as you're going along. You know, if you see somebody says something interesting, you can comment back. I'm going to ask you to put things in the chat occasionally. Do that because it reinforces what we're trying to learn. But then also, people can learn who you are and follow up offline. Hey, I saw you on Neil's training. Love to connect, see if there's a synergy between our 2 companies. If you're not in LinkedIn, by the way, out there on Facebook, YouTube, etc., please come in. Feel free to connect with me. I'm open to connections, and I know everybody in the community is open to connections as well. As you can tell, I'm going to move at a fire hose pace. I got a lot of stuff to share with you, a lot of good tactical information and steps you can take. And I want to make sure I cover it all. So I'm going to move pretty fast. You can always come back and rewatch if you need to. But before I show you the agencies that I believe love 8A small businesses, I want to talk about avoiding a couple of different types of agencies, and then the criteria I use a little bit on which ones to choose. And so let's talk about avoiding agencies that miss their goals. If an agency misses their goal, they don't care about hitting their goal. I don't care about all the other details. If I have salespeople and they miss their goal, you didn't care about doing it. If you cared, you'd come to me and ask me to help you, and I'd help you to hit your goal, right? In agencies, it's the same way. If they cared about hitting their goal, they would hit it. And so I'm recommending you don't waste energy on agencies that miss goals, thinking to yourself, well, if I go talk to that agency that's missing their goals, they really need me. They need my 8A business because they're not hitting their 8A goal or whatever, right? But that's not the case. If they wanted to hit the goal, there's 5,000 8A firms out there who would love to work with them. They're not reaching out to find them. And so avoid that hole that you find yourself in by chasing agencies that aren't hitting their goals. The second one to follow with this, and this is a fun one for me, is avoid the agencies that are hitting their goals. It doesn't mean anything. And I know this sounds kind of odd. Let me walk you through it, right? The SBA gives almost every agency out there an A grade each year. It's amazing, but half of them are failing small businesses. Half of them are not really working with small businesses in a way that could be helpful and reach you. I want to show you this one graph. This is called a bell curve, right? And I use it for many different reasons. But half of the agencies out there just aren't hitting the goal. But the ones on the left-hand side are. And what I'm saying by focusing on agencies that are showing through contract awards that they value 8A firms, by doing that, you avoid hanging out on the right-hand side. It's not a knock to any of these agencies. I'm just saying, if they're not hitting their goals, you showing up and saying I can hit the goals is not going to help them. And if they are hitting their goals and they're getting an A grade, well, how are they doing that? And that's the next thing I want to talk about. I wrote an article a long time ago, and I'm going to take a shot at being completely candid in my thoughts. This article to me was so controversial that I wrote it and then I never posted it. I think I wrote it in 2018. And the title of it, and you'll know why I didn't, I hesitated, but the title of it was Marines Retreat. And the purpose behind it was that I wrote this article because I was pushing heavily in the hub zone back in 2018, really helping the hub zone program move forward. And what I realized is the Marine Corps, in particular, one of their system commands, they were constantly missing their goal. In this case, it was a hub zone goal, but they were constantly missing it. And they kept revising their goal down. And at some point, they hit the goal and gave themselves 100% credit. They're like, hey, we hit the goal. They all celebrate, high fives. Let's get a bonus at the end of the year, whatever it is. But when they did that, they were 73% below the federal goal. So the federal goal was like 3%, and they were 73% below it. And the reason I'm telling you this story is not to knock the Marines. As an Army guy, we learned that's not a good thing. But it's to say I don't trust the goals. Those are just metrics. Those are just numbers that are out there that are kind of artificial. They're kind of like a P-win to me. They're made up on the spot. But the idea that they could lower the goals down, but then give themselves an A grade for hitting the goal tells me don't value the goals. What you want to value is this third point is you want to focus on the agencies that are actually awarding contracts. And so one other thing, let me back up that I forgot that I want to say is sometimes goals are met, even 3%, that one I said a minute ago, they could hit that goal, but they could do it with a couple of really large contracts that are product-based to some firm or two or three or something, and they could hit that goal where 99% of the dollars are going to Dell for the Dell computers, and this 8A gets like the 1% or whatever it is. And so that doesn't mean that agency is friendly to 8As. It just means they hit their goal because they bought so much in one area. What I look for when I determine whether an agency is friendly to an 8A is, are they awarding a lot of contracts to 8A firms? It's a really simple metric for me, but when I look at that and I see the dollars match it as well, there's millions of dollars being awarded, but I want to see many different awards. I don't want to see 5 or 10, right? I want to see hundreds, if not thousands of awards every year from an agency for me to determine that that's a friendly agency. And so, as I move forward, I recommend you don't focus on agencies on the goal side, whether they're missing it or hitting it. Focus on the agencies that are actually awarding contracts to 8A firms. It tells me that they believe in value in you. They value 8A small businesses. And so do me a favor, in the chat, put common belief. If you understand that it's better to work with an agency that sees and values you already, you don't have to convince them to value 8A businesses. You and they both know the value of 8A small businesses to an agency's mission. That's common belief. So put that in the chat. You don't want to be working with agencies that you have to convince that you and your company are of value to them, right? There's too much of an uphill battle. Certainly you can make money in there at some point, but when you're an 8A small business and you're trying to push further and further into the federal market, push into the side of the agencies, the side of the federal market that actually loves 8A. So put common belief in there. And let me move on. Hopefully that made sense, by the way. It's really simple math that I do. And so I said this a minute ago, but I just want to make sure I say this before I share my screen. When I have a criteria and I'm trying to determine, is an agency friendly to an 8A? Do they love 8As? It's defined 100% on the awards they make, right? Not the goals. And so I'm looking in there to see what awards they make. And that's where I want to go in and talk to you about it at the moment. So let me share my screen. Okay, so, that's funny. So I'm sharing my screen, but I just want to show something, by the way. We've got all the 8A training going on this week. Come into my profile and click on this featured article. It has all 5 trainings this week listed out, and you can find them on different topics. How to get your first 8A, why you must win. This one here, why you must team with small businesses. This is for everybody else to say how great 8As are for their goals as well. Thursday is about following up after the 8A conference or any conference to make sure you have success. And then the last one is how to make that 8A certification work for you. It's not enough to have it, but you can find this information inside my profile. And make sure you're subscribed to the newsletter if you're not. One other thing that I happen to have this tab open, and let me walk across and show you. This is what I mean. Every one of these agencies, except for HUD for some reason, I thought HUD was super good to smalls, but it's like they're trending down or something. But all of these guys got A or A grades, most of them. A couple have B grades, right? But how could everybody get the exact same grade? And it's because they're percentage to goal type thing. Again, I'm not here to knock anybody. I'm just saying those numbers don't help us small businesses. So let me dive in and show you how I find which agencies love 8A small businesses the best. And 100% love is defined by the number of contracts they're awarding us. Okay, so I'm using two tools you're familiar with, USA Spending and FPDS. And I'm going to show both of those. I'm going to try to track my time here because I got one other slide I want to talk about. The steps for getting into these agencies. So the first thing I'm doing, if you haven't used FPDS or USA Spending, let me just give you a quick criteria. At the top here, hopefully you can see this. Let me zoom in a little bit. At the top here, you can see that the time period I set for this is just 3 fiscal years, or the last 2 fiscal years, basically. So I'm looking at that. I'm looking at awards up to 25 million. There's actually 8As that have won contracts well north of 25 million, but you don't need to pay attention to those agencies. You want to pay attention to the ones that are, in my opinion, rolling out with a lot of $1 to $5 million contracts. That's what I was really looking for, because those help an 8A small business grow as you get ready to graduate in 3 years or 9 years, whenever that is. And then the other thing I defined here, and this is a little harder for me to show, so let me back this. Let me go right there. So basically, I just chose all the type of set-asides. Any version of 8A, I didn't care. I would count it. But these are all. You can see 8A sole source or competed. And then sometimes they combine it with hub zones. And then last time they call it SDB, but it's 8A. Different contracting shops enter information in differently. So I was just trying to make sure I captured the bulk of the data I wanted to find. So when I did this search, that's all I searched on, those 3 things: the date, the amount, and 8A set aside. When I did, it comes back and it lets me know, obviously DoD is the largest. And the reason they're the largest is because their budget basically equals all of the civilian market. And so the only reason I would say pay attention to DoD is if you can get in there already. If you got a clearance, facility clearance, or if you got a personal clearance, if you worked in the Army, like I was in the Army, so I might go back in there. But if you don't have a tie to defense, don't worry about going in or not going in there and feeling like you're missing out. Because over here, HHS has spent $2 billion on 8A firms last year. If you can get a piece of that $2 billion, that's good growth, right? That's not $2 billion going to larges and everybody else. That's going to 8As already. So we'll come back to that. So one of the first things I do is I come in and I say, just show me the top 10 agencies. I can click down here on the bottom and see more, but I don't really care at the moment. You can dig in further as you go forward. The other thing I'm doing is I'm saying, show me the entire federal government. What I would recommend you do is choose a department on this left-hand side. Choose one of the departments and say, you know what? For the next 12 months, we're going only into HHS. They're huge. They're more than big enough to hit any goal that you have. If you did that, then you could come over here to awarding or funding agency on the bottom left, and you could put HHS in there, and then you're only seeing the data filter down lower. The next thing I do, just from a high level, I'm looking here, but I want to see what sub-agencies, and this is really hard because the Department of Army is a department itself, and it has agency level commands in there. But I can get a good idea because I can keep hitting next to figure out where they're at. But when I look at HHS as an example, I can start seeing some of the folks that have awarded. But here's Defense Health, right? I got a customer interested and they're in Defense Health, and I can see that's a fairly friendly agency to 8As because they did 500 million to 8As over the last 2 years, right? That's pretty good for a smaller agency like that. And this is breaking in, I think, at the headquarter level. It's not breaking all the components of DHA, if you know them. But anyways, I can start looking at this and determining my sales and marketing activities based on what I'm seeing. So one of the things I can see is if I'm in DoD, I don't know why, but the Army is twice as big as anybody else, right? And so that makes me want to research them further. But what I can see is the Army clearly looks like they love 8As. not that Air Force and Navy don't, right? They're hitting their goals, but they spend so much. It's not that hard to set aside $2 billion to 8A firms. But for some reason, the Army's doing this. And so I would go in and begin to explore more about what the Army's doing it. And in fact, I might come over here. Let me just do it. It's awarding agency. So I'm going to type in Army here. I want to see a breakdown if I can and see if it lets me do this. So all I did is put Army there, and hopefully it'll tell me, let me come here. No, it's not breaking it down for me further. I was hoping it would break it down further for me, but it's not. But if I wanted to go in there and get that information, I could just begin to reach out further through FPDS, which I'll show you in a second. So anyways, now I'm looking at the departments and the agencies, and I don't care about any others. If they're not here, but I'm an 8A, I want to be here. I want to be in one of these groups, right? GSA makes sense because they run STARS 3. So even if they're, and this isn't necessarily their business. They could be buying it for somebody else. But these other ones like DHS and HHS, I would be exploring those further. They each got $2 billion going towards 8A small businesses. Well, then I want to know, like I could do this with HHS, I know, because I did this earlier. I know I can look at HHS and find its sub-agencies. And so here I can see the bulk of the 8A dollars are going to CDC. I would look into CDC and figure out, is it a lot of PPE type stuff, or is it consistent spending? I might actually go further into CDC and just make sure there's consistency across it. But right now, looking at this, if I wanted to target HHS, it's got multiple subordinate commands or agencies within it. So I would want to be looking at these top 3 or 4. I don't need to look at more. I want to go in there and help the people at CDC know who I am. And that's what you want to do. So that's USA spending, being able to look in there and see it. And I'm going to pause here in case you do a screenshot or something later. But here's just the filters I use to get me started looking at it. The next thing I want to look at is FPDS. It's a different way of looking at the exact same data. And here, what I'm looking at, I can dive a lot deeper. Even though I can look at opportunities within USA spending and click down a little bit, it's not quite the same as coming over here into USA or into FPDS. And so one thing I wanted to point out, though, when I did this same search, type of set-asides, description is 8A sole source, 8A this or that, competitive. And then I said, show me that same time period, last 2 fiscal years. But what I wanted to show you is there's 68,000 transactions that came back. This is a flaw in FPDS if you don't pay attention to it. It's actually by design, but you got to pay attention to it. Otherwise, it gives you false data. But 68,000 is not the number I want. And so what I did is I came down here and I added one more criteria. You can see it here up in the in this field, or you can see it over on the right on the search criteria. But I said, show me anything that's 5,000 to 250 million. I just said, show me everything on the high end. But in this case, I'm able to come back and I cut down the number of opportunities to 33,000. The reason this is important is now you're looking at real awards that are out there. I'm not looking at zeros and I'm not looking at negatives, which is money coming back to the government. And so when I did this, I'm able to see the top 10 departments over on the right-hand side. We already kind of knew this, right? There's Department of Defense, and then there's Health and Human Services. But one of the interesting things is this is sorted by the number of transactions that happen. And I can see that GSA for 8A firms is a good place to be paying attention to, whether it's selling into them or having their vehicles, STARS 3, whatever it is, and being able to have action. I can start driving down further on this as well when you start clicking on it. I don't want to do it now because doing it real time is never that good. But I can see this might help me decide, you know what, I'm going to go after Department of Agriculture. They got 1,800 contract awards that went to one way or another to an 8A small business. I want to go find out about that and figure it out. Or I'm going into Homeland Security. And like I did before, if I'm going into Homeland Security, I want to see the details. By the way, really quick aside, you can export this data out and to be able to see all the information, see the contracting agencies, but it also allows you to do these pivot tables. And if you don't know about pivot tables, just go to Google and type in pivot tables and watch 30, 60, 2 hours worth of pivot table lessons, and you will instantly become a pretty good expert at using it. You can't teach it, but you'd be able to use it. But pivot tables are great because they let you look at it. Like right here, all I wanted to see when I created this was which agencies had how many different transactions. And so I can see like this one here, CDC right there had 1,781. So I'm able to see that data and go down. I'm not going to go too much further, but all you have to do is click this CSV button over on the right, and you can export this data out. Take the time to learn how to use the tools of your job, FPDS, USA Spending, Excel, right? I don't know if Google Sheets does the same type of thing. Coming down on the left-hand side, you can see the same information, a little bit more information going forward on how they break it down even further, right? So DoD is at the top, and here's Army, Air Force. And so I start seeing the transactions in there, and it helps me drive towards those agencies that love 8As because they are doing contract awards towards the 8As. One other thing to keep in mind, if you're not tracking on this, it's always a hit or miss on which one of these I hit. Okay, so that this prepared user is supposed to have something, but sometimes these people are difficult on us and they don't actually share it. Okay, here you go. So this particular opportunity, $99 million. Let me go look at that and make sure it's right. 8A sole source. This is one that makes me want to call the agency and go, why? How did this happen? But it's written down as an 8A sole source, one offer received for $99 million worth of work, right? And I don't know what it is. It could be totally something that's proprietary to them kind of thing. But what I wanted to show you is here's where you find the person's name and number, usually a contracting specialist, contracting officer, but certainly somebody you can follow up with. So anyways, let me pause there. I want to get to this last slide. Where am I? Okay, so the last thing I wanted to share with you is just how do you reach out, right? So I'm showing you which agencies are friendly to you. And the way you determine that is not by goals, but by awards. In fact, in the chat, put awards, not goals. So I can see that you understand that you need to measure an agency by the awards it makes to 8A firms, not whether it achieves some random goal that they set for themselves. But the last thing I wanted to just say is 3 steps to remember. I got 5 minutes, and I just want to walk you through this. 3 steps to remember to get started in one of these agencies. So I picked the Army, let's say, because I was in the Army. When I look at this, the 3 steps I want to follow is, first thing I'm going to do is research them. So I'm going to research further in FPDS. I looked at the Army, but that's too big. I want to go down and go, well, what commands within the Army? So I'll just dig down which program offices are in there that are showing up in FPDS, et cetera. So I'm going to research that data. I'm also going to research the Army. If I don't know about them, I'll research those offices that I find. But what I'm looking for is for you to find this same information that I found when I showed you that example, but just pick one department like HHS and then try to narrow it down on 1 or 2 agencies that you begin to do outreach. In fact, if you haven't done this before, just do one command or one agency, one office. Get practice reaching out and saying, hey, I was looking over here. I want to do an introduction call, which I'll talk about in a second. So the first step is research. Second step is target. By the way, if you don't know this, this is coming right from my 7-step process for federal revenue success, right? So if you don't have this diagram, download it. But I just took the complicated world of government contracting, made it easy by saying it's 7 steps to success. And so I just said research. Now I'm talking about targeting, and it's the same thing, right? Targeting is just using FPDS and finding those contracting officers that sit at the top of every item. So if you find an item in FPDS or USA Spending that you wish you win, go find the point of contact and reach out, and you can begin to do introductions. You can also find small business specialists. We have a small business director. It's free. It's on the govconchamber.com website. But on that website, you can find this directory, which has over 1,000 names of small business professionals within the federal agencies. So between FPDS and that directory, you should be able to create a target list of who to reach out to begin to develop a relationship in an agency that you find loves 8As. And the last thing you're going to do is you're going to do outreach. And outreach really is just picking up the phone and calling them, and email as well, but really call them with a voicemail first. And all you're trying to do is to schedule a 15-minute introduction meeting. Start making this a habit of yours. Only 15 minutes for the first call. If it's good enough, you guys can schedule a second call, right? But if it's bad or not helpful to either one, you can get off the call quicker. Don't use up an hour for a meeting when you could do it in 15 minutes and then schedule a second one with more detail going into that meeting. So the third step is outreach. So research, target, and then outreach, and you'll begin to break into these agencies that love 8A firms. So follow the 7-step process into the chat. If you understand that success in these agencies that love 8As begins with just following the 7-step process. So follow the 7-step process into chat. Okay, hopefully you're still with me at the speed of sound here, speed of a fire hose. But let me recap what we talked about, because it's really important to me that you're focusing on agencies that actually buy from 8A small businesses, and you're avoiding the agencies that are not, right? The agencies that are not buying from 8As a lot probably don't really care about hitting those goals, but the ones who are buying want to work with you. The second thing is know who those top agencies are by researching in FPDS, digging deeper into that. And then the third thing we talked about are 3 steps you can take: research, targeting, and outreach, that'll get you started in the next 90 days or 30 days, not 90 days, 30 days. If you do this, you can be in the agency inside of 30 days, having conversations that will lead to more, right? So visit FPDS. That's my tip for you today or tomorrow. Visit FPDS to understand which agencies are top for what you sell, what your products or services are. I showed you how you can go into FPDS or USA Spending, put your keyword in, and now you'll be able to filter those 33,000 down to 500, let's say, that really are matches to what you sell.